I should have known when Severance season 2 came out and everyone was talking about it that, of course, we were going to cover it. We covered season 1. And I think, like, I was kind of watching over a little bit of our first episode, and I was like, I feel like we were kind of very much like the season 1 innies in like we were like learning.
Yeah.
So we were like, oh wow, corporate world sucks. Like we knew that. Like obviously like, we knew about company towns and but like it was in recent time that we specifically covered like worker alienation, and we've covered like so frequently now like Amazon and its treatment of employees and all of the union busting. And for a company that has the most unions trying to happen and the most like lawsuits, like there's a lot to be unpacked there.
Last time we were like, oh yeah, I'm seeing the signs of a dystopian world, and now we're like, we're in the dystopian world even more than we were before. Like it was like, I kind of see the parallels, what's happening, and now we're deep in it. Parable is happening.
Yeah, we're here. It's coming. It's already done.
It's here.
You know, we're in the midst of the apocalypse in a way. So, not post-apocalyptic, modern apocalypse.
We are apocalypsing presently.
Yeah. Absolutely. Definitely, if you have not seen season 1 or season 2 of Severance, you should definitely watch it before you check it out. It is more science fiction than I would say horror. It's definitely a thriller. It is more accessible that way, so if you are a scaredy cat of things, you won't be afraid of this. This is more
it's not
trippy,
scary. There's one instance where there's blood, and it's the last episode.
And it's like,
you
kind of we're kind of dealing with it as it goes, you know?
Yeah, so in my section, I'll be talking like it's similar to what we talked about last time. I will be real. I basically wanted to like follow up on what I talked about last time to give like more modern taste, because we were in a more optimistic time when the last time we covered this, which I'll kind of get into. So I'll be real. The Severance, like most horror-themed media right now, hits especially close to home with everything going on presently. As we said at the beginning, the dystopia is in full swing. And it's depressing out here. Something that we see in season 2 even more is that it's rough to be an innie. It's also rough to be an outie. It just sucks to be alive.
It's just rough.
But when a person's whole experience and existence is a windowless office filled with manipulation and unjust labor practices, it's worth rebelling over. As Gabe said, your work self is still you, and they deserve rights and freedom and a window. And as Helly shouts in season 2, did you think that just because you gave us half a life that we wouldn't fight for it? Additionally, as we see in non-severed people, working for Lumen sucks all around, pushing people to do awful things for the promise of power that is never really delivered upon. And like I texted Gabe like multiple times where I was like, I don't want them to be evil. And Gabe's like, actually, they're not. And I was like, oh wait, you're so right. Yeah, people are complex because these characters, this season specifically, which I'll talk about more, but they really show us that the middle management, not a villain. They're doing harmful things, absolutely. Their impact, not great. But they are just as much victims of this system of exploitation as the other people on the severed floor. If anything, they push them to work even more hours because they don't get to sever out of the situation. They don't get to divide that personhood. Also, Severance can be like...
I was going to say, the amount of times that they send Mr. Milchick out after hours, like constantly, they're like,
what's
you have
his
to deliver this message.
Pay?
Yeah. And to that point where he was like, I'm not doing it anymore. And I was like, that's my man.
Yeah, like when Mark calls him, he's like, it's just a job, right? And he literally almost cries.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yes. Ugh, my heart.
Oh, okay. But I will say Severance is also like kind of an allegory for slavery. It's just like, that's what our country wants so freaking hard. And this really just like shows us that's what they want so freaking bad, you know? So as Gabe said, when I texted them and was like, why? People are complex in this show, and season 2 gives us so much more complexity than we had gotten in season 1. And I think that really plays to the strength of continuing the story. So as we face our own day-to-day struggles of being alive, drowning in capitalism and it's all its wrath, and in its lack of work-life balance, and it's we need money to survive, but it costs so much of ourselves, we, like Helly, might ask the following question: do people at the top really expect us not to fight back? Those at the top so vastly underestimate us as workers and operate as if they'll never face consequences. And I'll give them this: it does feel like that sometimes.
Especially right now.
Especially with the world being what it is. But Severance shows us that the less you give someone to lose, the more willing a person might become to fight back. Also, it's like if you have people you care about and you're losing them, you're going to want to fight this evil systemic problem.
Yeah, it's a delicate balance of oppression. Like you cross a certain boundary, you get to a person to the point where it's like, I got nothing else. I have to fight back. Like, you fucked up.
As the French Revolution showed us.
Yes.
When they underestimate the people who they've forced into poverty and say, let them eat cake, some people are going to lose their heads. It's just what it is.
I mean, even just learn from South Korea.
Yeah.
They were like,
they won. They successfully did it.
He's out. He's gone. Please take some notes.
But the moral of the story is, like, we've talked about how wealth, like, just corrupts a person's mind. And one of the biggest things that ends up happening is because they think they are gods and all powerful, and that they'll never face consequences. They'll never have a rebellion. They'll never have a revolution. And
that's why we need more
underestimating of a population has consistently led to successful revolutions. So last time we covered Severance, I spoke a lot about worker power. So with that in mind, let's start with the bad news first. We've unfortunately seen many shifts backwards in terms of worker power and autonomy in a job market that is volatile and realigning itself with archaic, power-hungry structures. Before, we had a lot more to be hopeful for. When we were covering this last, we had started to make waves of progress. Unions were being, like, they're trying to bust them, but, like, we were making strides. And it's not to say we aren't anymore. It's just, it's being drowned out by the overwhelming shock of all the awful. So after season 1, we were coming right after the Great Resignation. Workers had a ton of power. We had spent an extensive amount of time in the pandemic isolation with massive career restructuring, and lots of people just resigned from their exploitative and soul-sucking jobs in mass volumes. And what we're seeing now is that it gave us a lot of power, but because the administration shifted, a lot of things have reverted back, because now companies are, like, basically, as someone who was recently looking for jobs, posting things that aren't real to trick investors to thinking like they're doing better than they are, posting jobs that they're never going to answer. And also just, like, not feeling compelled to hire new people because the workforce was a little traumatized by the Great Resignation. It was necessary. We needed to stand up for ourselves. It's not a bad thing. The bad thing is who's in power right now. If we did not have that happen, we would be continuing rolling the ball forward.
Yeah. You gotta also think of, like, they're being held hostage, right? Like, with the tariffs and the fact that, like, jobs, entire organizations are being shut down. Like, we're losing those jobs as well. Like, people, like, the workforce and the, like, employers are being held hostage.
Absolutely. Small businesses taking a ton of hits. It's like, it's really rough out there. There have been some victories and losses on that front too, which I unpacked. Companies like Starbucks, Amazon, union busting, illegal practice. 2025, I don't know if you've read it, Project 2025. There's a lot of stuff in there about outlawing unions. Historically, they've never been able to. Like, specifically on April 24th, there were a lot of losses in court for Trump. So, like, people are fighting back. We are getting some wins. It's just really scary out there, ultimately. As Gabe was saying, like, a lot of things have just been lit on fire. And companies are scrambling, essentially, and workers are scrambling. So we've also seen many companies restructure their priorities to adjust to a new market post-2020. There's a big prioritization of hybrid and remote work, as well as just more inclusive workspaces. As Gabe said, many were so corrupt that these were entirely performative, and others, like, they really shifted their entire way of operating to either performatively or successfully shift how their organizations were run to be more inclusive of not just old white men. And that's not to say that those aren't our priorities now. It's not just not true anymore. The demands are still more prevalent than ever, but the pandemic opened our eyes that we can have balance, and we've been fighting for that. We just have this administration, the Heritage Foundation, and Project 2025 to contend with. It's basically reinstalling heads of companies that align with their goals in mind, instead of the people who had gotten in finally and were finally making progress. So the parallels between Severance and a decline in worker power extend even further when we look at the non-severed employees positioned as villains. And in season 2, we start to see them crack under the pressure of entirely unreasonable expectations. And in another article titled, "We're All Innies Now, Apple TV's Severance Feels Too Real" from Psychology Today. Thank you, Gabe, for sharing that with me. They give a great outline of how federal workers specifically have been impacted right now and are living like their own severance right now under DOGE cuts and widespread uncertainty. So they're not severed, but they are experiencing the trauma that we see, like, honestly, like even Milchuk and Natalie experience, and like Cobell experience, and just a big shift from like any kind of humanity focused work to productivity. So the writer says, as federal employees, I've watched some of the logic of severance seep into the workplace. After hours, fork in the road emails, you get like a 7 p.m. email and you're expected to answer it, seem even more veiled as threats dressed up as opportunities. What did you do last week? Check-ins are required to be sent to an anonymous inbox with no feedback coming back, and rumors on monitoring echo Lumen's constant oversight. Like Microsoft Teams being able to like really see what you're doing.
They can see when you stop
monitoring.
Yeah. Moving your mouse.
So teams vanish overnight without explanation, while others wait in limbo, wondering if the next email will end their decades-long career. But this is not just a situation in federal government. Across industries, workers are seeing psychological safety fade, self-care diminished as indulgent, and autonomy stripped by rushed return to office mandates, and empathy treated like weakness. It feels like we're all the innies now, expected to follow orders, not ask questions, and suppress our humanity, not celebrate it. And that's the hallmark of this transactional leadership. And it's making a comeback. Leaders who once prioritized relationships are now walled off. Loyalty seems more important than expertise. Caring for employees is an afterthought at best. But we've known for decades that transactional leadership doesn't work. There's a lot of evidence to support this. Endless corridors of research show that trust, inclusion, and purpose, not fear and control, drive real results. It's like when you're thinking of, why does crime exist? Because you're not giving people their basic living needs. Let's just add more cops. It's very much that, but in careers. So essentially, even federal performance frameworks center feedback, learning, and well-being, but those principles are being pushed aside for speed, control, under the guise of efficiency. So every day we hear of worsening conditions and threats to worker power under the Trump-led Republican administration. The DOGE cuts were intentionally done to make sectors of government so short-staffed that they are inoperable, so that closing them will appear justified. It's literally just like scorched earth policy. Like, we're going to make it so that you're so frustrated when you call Social Security because you can't get a hold of anyone, and these like processes are so convoluted and there's literally no one working anymore, that like, you're going to be happy when we take it away.
Yeah, you'll be like, see?
Yeah, we got rid of that incompetent company. And it's like, actually, you're the one who did that, bro. It's fine. In good news, there have been pushback from the courts here, as I was saying, as these cuts did not follow the laws that had been established surrounding discrimination in the workplace, as well as legal processes when it came to firing procedures. Everyone's getting sued. What's lovely is that there's a lot of people who are like, consequences don't exist. I underestimate the poverty. And that they're getting consequences. Like the people who took that one woman out of there was
like a council meeting or not? City hall.
They're all going to jail because they assaulted her unjustly, and that was not okay. Even though all the Republican senators were like, "Yay, they did it!" And it's like, no, there's consequences for brutality. You can't just do that, bro. So the law is helping. We'll see. They're towing the line. We're gonna find out as next time on Dragon Ball Z. We're just gonna keep waking up and seeing where the things fly, fighting as much as we can, and hoping that we all don't cease to exist. It's not funny. It's super sad. While some federal workers sit in limbo, having one being wrongfully let go, like there's an example, like the federal workers who were let go were told that they couldn't be let go. That was illegal, what they did with the big mass firings. So now they're not allowed to return to their jobs, but they're getting paid still. So
and they get
Doge is not saving the government anywhere near what was promised.
No.
It's vastly incompetent. But we're in a history will tell us. Either way, at large, many federal workers are traumatized. And that's the biggest thing is like, there's been so much assault on like people's livelihoods, the sudden loss of like, how am I going to pay my bills? How am I going to take care of my family? I had dedicated years upon years to this company who threw me away in a second, you know? And there's a trauma with that, and we're robbing people of their autonomy in doing that because now you're not letting people be human at work. And all that's to say that Severance is topical as heck and relevant to our history, both in past and present day. So in another article titled Severance and Threats to Bodily Autonomy, Past, Present, and Future from Miss Magazine, they discuss the way Severance and Lumen relates to our real-world history, specifically when thinking of the episode featuring Miss Cobell and her life at Salt Neck. They say, the show's depiction of the fictional corporation Lumen Industries builds upon a history of real-world corporate malpractice and worker exploitation. And they cite an example of this as the industrial age, where factory workers were forced into labor, often women and children, to work in dangerous conditions for low wages. And when we think of this, we think of Cobell and the man from the town whose name escapes me. Do you know what their name was?
I don't.
Their friend who's lived there their whole life. We're talking about being forced to work at Lumen as children, not really getting to go to school. Like there's a Lumen school, you know, like everything was run by Lumen. It was entirely controlled by Lumen. So giving every facet of themselves to this company that did not value them. And additionally, as Gabe was saying, thinking of Cobell in her youth, developing the entire program for Severance, like literally made the whole thing and got zero credit. They threw her away as soon as they literally could. Like, they gave her no credit and they kept her where she was. And it was just similar to what happens in real life. Ultimately, this man, Egan, was like, I did it. He did not. He absolutely did not. He hired an intern.
He's a little weirdo freak.
Stole their idea like Spotify. So she got zero credit, and Cobell and the other people in Salt Neck grew up in a company town, essentially, exploited by Lumen from the time they were born until they die. And considering how Gemma was exploited, maybe even after they die, you know? Owing everything they have to a company that doesn't view them as people. So the article continues to draw parallels to union busting as well. And we see this in Lumen's breaking up any kind of rebellion by retiring innies or any kind of rebellion by basically taking out their enemies. As we see Bert, his whole story is that he used to just drive people places and he didn't know what happened to them when they got there, and they never came back. So examples of this in our recent history are corporations such as Starbucks, Amazon, and SpaceX firing pro-union workers, refusing to bargain for stalling negotiations, and intimidating workers. We also see this like for federal judges. Like recently, they were sending pizza boxes to like judges' houses and their children's houses just to be like, I know where you live.
Mm-hmm.
It's intimidation tactics, essentially. And if you have time, I also super recommend checking out the article titled Apple TV Severance, The Role of the Jester's Privilege in Leftist Media Dilemma, because they unpack the limits of the show like Severance has when it's owned and housed under a company like Apple. I just found the article super interesting. And they also like tie back to a lot of historical context. So if like you have 2 minutes, go read that. Highly recommend. And basically it calls out the fact that like a company like Apple, who basically operates its own Egan, Kier, empire of a business by like deifying Steve Jobs and like this tech industry. It's one of the previews for Severance had the CEO of Apple, and it's like, you're the enemy, bro. You're literally Egan. Like, get out of there. This isn't your joke, but it is because they own it. So how much can they really say? The show is essentially limited by its platform. But I will say, as Gabe said, like they do get to say a lot, even though it's like kind of like, if I make fun of myself, you can't hurt me kind of thing. Yeah. So they're writing the narrative so that it looks like they're in on the joke when they're the problem. But media literacy, conflict of interest at play, just letting us everyone know. I also wanted to provide an update on company towns because we mentioned a lot of company towns in our last Severance episode, and they hadn't been built yet. But they're getting built. It's happening. I'm not happy about it. Performance. So in our last Severance episode, I mentioned the creation of some new company towns, and I wanted to provide an update since that we recorded that over a year ago. So just to give a brief overview for those who haven't listened to that episode and do not know what a company town is. A company town is a community that is built and owned by a single company. Historically, they've been terrible and super exploitative, where a company provides housing, jobs, and various services to its employees. These towns often arise in remote areas where the company operates, and they can exert significant control over the lives of their residents because there's literally nowhere else for them to work or get resources, including their work, social interactions, and even aspects of their personal lives. So Salt Neck, as we saw on the show. Last time I specifically spoke of Meta's Willow Village that has begun construction on housing units. So like they were a few years out, they're still planning stuff. They have broke ground. They're building those houses. We won't know the impact of it until people start to move in and live there, but it's being built. So it will happen. Considering everything else, it's very, very parable of the sower. Amazon has continued to own even more of Seattle, expanding its real estate for AI and e-commerce. They also made it so that there is an in-person working mandate. So similar to Philadelphia, efforts there, at least in Philadelphia, to increase traffic through their businesses. The main difference here being Amazon owns almost all the businesses in Seattle. So the reason they made the mandate is so that people will spend money at their owned businesses. So they're paying people and getting all that money back. That's the benefit of a company town. Very limited overhead for these people who are exploiting people. There's also additional company towns being constructed in Texas by our least favorite human, Elon Musk, specifically around SpaceX and Tesla manufacturing. What is super real about this is like they're in super remote areas of Texas. So like they are going to exploit the heck out of that community. And if we've learned anything about how Elon feels about other human beings, it's going to be bad. So as a fun anecdote, though, there have been company town specific protests of sorts with crosswalk terminals being hacked to play deepfaked audio of the CEOs saying satirical messages. This is both in towns where Musk owns much of the business, as well as Amazon and Meta hubs. An article on KUOW within the NPR network gives us some quotes from this audio, and it's basically in the voice of Jeff Bezos saying, instead of these little robotic voice that tells you to wait until it's safe to cross, at least 5 intersections in Seattle last week played something like this. Hi, I'm Jeff Bezos. This crosswalk is sponsored by Amazon Prime with an important message. Please don't tax the rich. Otherwise, all the other billionaires will move to Florida too. Does this actually solve the problem? No. But it's nice to hear things like this when you feel like the world is on fire, because there are people acknowledging it. Not no one is acknowledging it. But you kind of like when you have to go to work every day and you're like, quotas. Q4, you know, and it's like the world is on fire. I don't care if we make Christmas sales, you know, like it's like, what do you mean? It kind of validates the insanity you're feeling every single day. To have something be like, yeah, actually, we're going to say that this guy's evil, because apparently it's actually super easy to hack crosswalk terminals.
I believe that.
Usually they have a factory password, and they're all Bluetooth operated, so you can just hack into it with your phone. So all that's to say is we don't have time for this, but I also recommend checking out 2 additional articles specifically about the art in Severance. It was just really interesting. So like a lot of the art that they used was very intentional in the background, and it was based off of actual paintings that like kind of show how art can be manipulated to present an idea of worthfulness. I don't know. Like they're like essentially like the youthful convalescence of Kier has like the sentimental scenes of the 19th century, basically aligning the company's founder with religious and historical figures worthy of veneration. And there's been like instances where this has been used by MAGA and like Trump supporters, like specifically John McNaughton, who paints Trump like he's Jesus, you know, like he is.
I've seen those.
Yeah, where he does like impressionist style paintings, or like him looking off at the waterfalls and the oceans. Like, you know, they're really trying to like make them look like a king of sorts and trying to like build that nostalgia. So the articles are 6 centuries of painting in Severance from glasstire.com, and then also Art of Kitsch in Severance, which is just like a Blogspot article. But it was just really interesting, like showing the correlation between like the art that's displayed in the show and how that like has this historical context of it's historiography. It's like how the information is presented, and like manipulating public perception through media and art is a form of propaganda. So the art really plays into the fact that they're trying to use even, what's his name? The brother. Rickon's book as like propaganda for the innies, and they're also using the art in a similar fashion to kind of like make Lumen look how it is, the art and how it's manipulated even for Milchek and Natalie. Similarly, it's like it's just very much gross, but it's from real paintings that exist. So I thought that was really interesting to like kind of tie it back to the historical roots of what they're trying to imply through the art. So I recommend those articles just to geek out about art history, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, there's even something to say about the fact that like when they have the story, like almost like folklore of Kier, and
I think it's like actual mythology.
Yeah, and it's such like a bizarre, like it really distances him. It makes him seem like this mythological being when he's just a guy. Like he really was just a guy. But by painting the story in this like magical way, it makes him seem like this otherworldly being that graced us with his presence, when it's just a story about his brother masturbating in front of him. You know, but they're like, soiled. Like, come on.
Yeah.
Helena was right for that one.
Yeah.
And I get what she was doing. She was laughing at Milchek. Because that's her history. And for her to laugh at it that way, and like I know part of it was like she was trying to be cool, like Helly, but she was laughing at Mr. Milchek. And that's like a really big deal, because he's supposed to have some sort of power here, and she was reminding him he has none. Yeah. Those little things are so important. We'll see if we keep it, but one of the fun things, Kat, to maybe answer your question about the goats, there's this really fun theory that's going around. I watched so many videos of it, and I was like, I'll believe it. I'll believe it. And it's the theory is that Rickon is a goat's Audi. So one of the goats in the Severance in the Lumen offices is tied to a person outside. So they make that, instead of making their body, they make a goat. I don't know how, but the reason, or like they're connected in some way. And the reason for this that people have, like their evidence is, one, there's a picture in season 2, like it's a flashback. It's Gemma's history. and the sister, I'm totally blanking on her name right now, but she's like showing the picture, and Mark's like, this is crazy. Like, you could do any kind of outdoor activity. Why would you go hiking or whatever? And it's Rickon like scaling a mountain like a goat. Like, it's eerie. Like, and he even I think he says it. He's like, you're like a mountain goat. Like, this is crazy. Like, no normal person could do that. And it's literally in the same, like, very close to the wall, kind of sideways look. There's also people were crediting the in season 1 at the end in the overtime contingency, and Rickon is reading from his book, The You That You Are. The way that he's speaking has like a ba cadence to it.
From the leaping cat to the cowering shrew, think of themselves as you, a logical center for the universe.
Like, if you
that's so interesting.
If you listen through, like, he'll like, I can't think of the words they say. I'll definitely try to find one of the clips that people have, but he'll just be like, you are, like that, like almost like when Miss Dr. Dillamond kind of spirals into in his story, and he's like, you know, it's kind of like that, like, but just a little tinge of like normal. And then on top of that, in the opening credits of season 2, they have all the weird like warping of you know, it's a really great animation. But when we see the name for Rickon's actor, it's an image of a guy that morphs into a goat.
Interesting.
I think there's also something to be said about the intense sadness that the goat people, the people who take care of the goats, have, and the connection. And one, it could be absolutely read as like, they're weird, right? They're strange people.
They just care about animals. I care about
like,
the goats.
Like, they feel really, they've raised them, right? Like, they care about them, which is like, you know, there's oftentimes like farmers and stuff definitely see it's like, this is cattle, like, this is what death is a part of this thing. So like, them being that like connected can sometimes be something, but it really, when she's like, how many more of them do I have to give? Right? Like, part of it absolutely could just be a care for animals. But there could be an extra layer to that heaviness of like, this is tied to a person. Yeah. Because unfortunately for a lot of people, you got to make an animal, or you got to compare an animal's being to humans for people to give a fuck. So
that's true.
It's
that's fascinating. I believe, I hope they're right with the goats.
There's also the one
that's interesting as heck,
where they say his book is titled The You Are. What's a you? It's a lady goat. The you. Anyway,
that's
hilarious.
It
could absolutely be a stretch. I think it's crazy for all those things to happen. Like, for that, like, nothing feels not intentional in this show. Like, we know, we talked about it last time, Ben Stiller said, everything has a reason. If you put a room full of goats, you have to have a reason, or something has to be going on. So if they put Rickon scaling a mountain like a mountain goat and speaking in that very specific way, there gotta be a reason. It's gotta be something. It's so interesting. Anyway.
I bet you he's a goat.
So
I love that. All right, the goats make sense. We'll find out season 3.
Yeah, season 3, TBD. Awesome. So that's our episode on Severance. I think, like the show, right? There's so much to unpack, and, you know, really happy to hear from you all about what you're seeing. If you have fun theories, if something you're excited about for season 3, how you feel about the sunken place showing up there. I think even there's a little bit of tethers too in the examination of an innie and an outie. Like, Jordan Peele, where are you at? Come on in here.
Where it's like, both of them matter. They're both people.
They're both people, and it's like in that same like hierarchy, right? Where we were supposed to think that the top tethers were more important than the tethers underground, and the only reason that they were different is because they grew up there. They didn't have the same, like, that's what we saw with Lupita Nyong'o's character. It's the same thing. Like, you could be. Anyway. That's a great episode. Thank you, Kat. And thanks, you know, to the team at Severance for making such a great show. Even if it is on Apple TV. Like, I get it.
Thank you, Gabe.
You need money, you know? Like, scientists, they need grants to be doing the science, right? Like, I get it. That's why Black Mirror, they got to be on Netflix, and they still poke at subscriptions. They still poke at technology and the insidiousness of companies like Netflix to their face. Yeah. They have Streamberry for that reason. That's their Netflix in the world. Anyway, we will be talking about Black Mirror at some point because there's some pretty good things that happened this recent season. So stay tuned. That'll be later this year. But we do have some more episodes in our horrors series, Horrors of Society series, because that's society is horrifying.
Horrifying.
Horrible. Yeah. So please subscribe.
When we're old, it's less. I hope it's less horrifying by the time we're old people.
Yeah, like we pass the baton and our kids are like, we don't have anything to talk about. All the shows are about butterflies and rainbows.
I want it to be boring.
We have trees everywhere.
Look at our planet not on fire and dying. Yeah.
Like, it was rough for you.
What even is these problems that you experienced are gone?
I wish for that world. Or we're just all in a simulation. They just upload us into a new one. I'll take it.
Bro. Give me cheat codes. Okay, yeah.
All right. Don't get married.
Bye. Delete your kids. I forgot our phrase.